In this video, I'm going to be breaking down question 19 of the USMLE's 2026 version of the free 120 sample questions for step 1, which is linked in the video description down below. Now, this is the same as question 26 on the 2024 version of the free 120, so if you've already seen that video, this is the same breakdown. If you haven't, I encourage you to pause the video, try working through the question on your own, then come back here and check out the breakdown. Okay, so let's take a look at the question, and as usual, we'll start at the end, figure out what they're asking before we go back to the passage and figure out the information that we need. So they're asking the most likely cause of the findings is a mutation in which of the following type of genes. So thinking about the questions we can see on step 1, diagnosis, association, or mechanism. I could see some people saying this sounds like an association question. I have to know the gene and then I have to know some other thing memorized with it. But maybe we could bring our mechanistic thinking into this and help us out a little bit. We'll see. We'll see what helps us out here. So let's go to the passage. We've got a 34-year-old person coming in with diarrhea. They've got a pheochromocytoma, history of pheochromocytoma. Mom has a history of a parathyroid gland thing. And going further down, vitals, nothing's really jumping out to me. We see a palpable mass on the right side of the neck, and we do a biopsy, and that shows it's a neoplasm of parafollicular cell origin. So what kind of mutation are we thinking of here? Now, the first thing I want to point out here, what they did in this question is this is a good example of the step may have tricky questions, but not trick questions. So they've got this patient with a pheochromocytoma, family history of a parathyroid thing, and then a parafollicular cell thing. And so right away I might be thinking, okay, like there's these weird endocrine tumors, and I remember the 3 Ps are part of M1, and so this looks like, I've got P and P and P, and then they might go down this 3 Ps pathway and call this MEN1. And that might hurt them on a diagnosis question, but if we think about the 3 Ps in MEN1, those are the wrong Ps, right? Like the MEN1 has pituitary, pancreas, and parathyroid stuff, whereas this is a parafollicular is our medullary thyroid cancer, and then pheochromocytoma, and then parathyroid. So this sounds like a MEN2A situation. And so now we've got to figure out what the gene is with MEN2A. And maybe you remember that maybe you remember it. I won't write it down yet. We'll say you don't remember it. And so if you don't know what the gene is, I could see somebody taking, kind of panicking and saying, okay, I'm just going to pick one of these and move on. I think we could still use our knowledge and maybe at least narrow down the choices. So cell cycle regulation gene. So when I think of those, I think of P53 and RB. And so our P53, that causes our Lee-Fraumeni syndrome with like sarcomas, lymphomas, adrenal things, and adrenal tumors, and then breast. And so that's not what we've got going on here. In RB, I think of like osteosarcoma and the retinoblastoma. And so we're not seeing either of those. So I would get rid of that. Or at least maybe I can't get rid of it, but I would put a down arrow next to it. I'd say of the tumors I've learned in this class, this doesn't meet either of those. It doesn't match up with either of those, so I'm less likely to pick it. Now, DNA mismatch. So that's like our MSH, MLH, and that's the one we see in Lynch syndrome. I remember that. Or like our familial, like non-polypopous hereditary colon cancer. And so I know I mixed up the order there. I'm just going to write Lynch. And so that would be like colon, uterine, ovarian cancers. And that's not what we're seeing here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And then we've got metastasis suppressor gene. I don't know if I've heard of any of those. Like maybe one could argue for E-cadherin on that. I'm not sure. And that I'm not sure about. So I'm just going to say I've never really heard of metastasis suppressor genes, so I'm less likely to pick an answer that I haven't heard about. That's going to get a question mark in the answers here. Proto-oncogenes, there's a ton of proto-oncogenes, and I'm not going to pretend that I know all of them, but I'm just going to write that there's many of those. And then tumor suppressor genes, that's kind of like, again, it comes back to P53, RB, BRCA is in here. There may be a couple others, I'm not sure. But of the tumor suppressor genes I know, that one doesn't fit into any of those. Like BRCA is going to be our breast cancer one. I don't know what else is in the tumor suppressor gene. There could be more. There may be more in any of these, but using the genes that I do remember, I'm going to say, okay, like, doesn't sound like a cell cycle one I've learned, doesn't sound like a mismatch one I've learned, doesn't sound like a tumor suppressor I've learned. I don't know what metastasis suppressor gene is. Like if we said maybe it's ECadherin, then that's one of our breast cancer, involved in our like ILC, our interlobar, our lobar breast cancers, or so even if that is what they mean by that, it still doesn't match. And so I would go with this one that has a bunch of genes in that class, and I would guess that. And in this case, that's the right answer. And whether or not that's going to always be the right answer on questions of these genes you don't know, I couldn't say for sure, but it's an approach I would use in this case where I don't have the specific details of this gene memorized. Now, the gene for this is RET. And if we were thinking about, so that's the gene for men 2A and 2B, and for men 1, that's going to be the men gene. And so, again, I couldn't really tell you the function of either of those other than on this one, RET is apparently a proto-oncogene. Men, I don't know, so you'll have to look that up on your own. And I encourage anyone, as you're studying, go through, make a running list of genes when you come across them, put down the disorder that they're associated with, and then just glance at that from time to time. You could even throw it in your locker on test day and just review it during breaks if you wanted to. There's no rule against that. And so I think it's worthwhile to know some genes, but there comes a point at which you're just getting too deep into some of this stuff. And so maybe you don't need to know the mechanism of every single gene out there. So this is how I would approach this question. I hope this was helpful, especially if you come across a gene question and you're not exactly sure which gene it is. Don't give up. Follow the knowledge that you do have of other genes to hopefully narrow those choices down. So if you like this video, check out some of the other videos in this series. And as always, I hope that this helps you out on test day.